imagery of the collapse of the World Trade Center and the political psychology of 9/11 well before it happened, in a poem entitled, if I remember correctly, The Badlands. I suggest that Lum's Honolulu poems are precocious testimony to the Nanjing poems, not in the sense of uncanny envisioning of a catastrophe before it happens, but in the sense of cultivating a kind of knowledge that would be profoundly reconfirmed through its inverse. In other words, Lum's Honolulu poems are about the making of the world, and the Nanjing poems have emerged out of the values and expressive strategies that were fashioned in the making of the Honolulu poems. I would like to test this idea through a reading of the poem called A Young Girl in a Cheongsam, which Wayne also read for you. And you need to prepare yourselves for looking at the next screen. A Young Girl in a Cheongsam is based on one of the photos from the photograph collection edited by Shan and James Yin, entitled The Rape of Nanking, An Undeniable History in Photographs. The photo shown here is from the second edition of the book, published in 1977. The poem begins with an explicit description of the body of a young girl who has been ordered to pose herself to commemorate the rape that either is about to take place or has just taken place. The girl's figure does not recur until the end of the poem, where it is superimposed with the poet's imagined image of his mother as a young girl taking the place of the girl in the photo. Between these parallel images that are so difficult to look at and contemplate, the body of the poem is structured through a multiplication and relocation of the image of the Cheongsam. It is lifted up and taken away to other places and other times. The first lifting has already been performed by the girl's assailants. The Cheongsam has been, quote, pulled up around her waist. At this point, the poem focuses on the item, begins to focus on this particular item of clothing, not the body of the girl, to enable a leap into peacetime. The speaker says, quote, her cheongsam is the kind that so many other girls also wore in those old days in China. The relocation of the young girl's cheongsam to old peacetime China allows it to be placed on the poet's mother, and then multiplied through reference to the mother's photo album containing snapshots of her life in China before the Japanese invasion and before she emigrated to Hawaii to be married. After being told that the mother's album is filled with photos of young girls wearing cheongsam in peacetime China, the image is transported to the body of a Chinese woman in Hawaii who has lived to old age. She is imagined as an aunt Lum might run into when shopping in Chinatown, a woman who might have survived the experience recorded in the Nanjing massacre photo. In short, the cheongsam has been relocated from Nanjing to Honolulu, from a victim's body in wartime to that of a woman who lives to old age in peacetime. Why this relocation and multiplication of the cheongsam? What is the point of these lovely images in the body of a poem that begins and ends the way it does? I suggest that the lifting of the cheongsam completely off the young girl's body and its relocation to peacetime context performs the ethical and aesthetic work that makes it possible to look at and contemplate the superimposition of the young girl in Nanjing 1937 and the poet's mother as a young girl. How many minutes do I have left? I have 2 minutes left. Okay. Okay. Thank you. The superimposition is made tolerable by our recognition that it is brought into being by the poet's inability to give up trying to write the peacetime obituary that he already knows is impossible. The superimposition reflects the manner in which an unremitting understanding of unmaking, namely that there is no way to unmake the fatally and intentionally injured body, becomes the basis for reasserting the values of civilization. The superimposition works both ways. If Honolulu embodies what is unmade in Nanking, Nanking tells us what exists in Honolulu. The poet is compelled to imagine the impossible recuperation of a young girl. His compulsion takes him to the point of an implied reversal of the rape in the form of his own self emerging from his mother's body, an extreme attempt, perhaps desperate in its sense of powerlessness, to remake the site of violence, to make this is bad, to remake the site of violence, to make Nanjing into Honolulu, to make war back into Wayne, say something stupid. No, I know, I just, yeah, I'm fine. Well, I'm not, but I will carry on if I can see my paper. In its sense of powerlessness, to remake the site of violence, to make Nanjing into Honolulu, to make war back into civilization. If this superimposition pushes at the limits of a reader's tolerance, it is a risk that illuminates the internal structure of creativity as the alleviation of pain, and does a great service for poetry and for critical war memory by connecting beauty to pain, reminding us that beauty must play a role in preventing the unmaking of the world. This is a photo from Honolulu-based artist Noe Tanigawa mentioned earlier. This is a photo from her website of her installation of Nanjing X, which is based on Lam's Nanjing poems. And he can tell you about it later because I have not experienced this installation. Here's a close-up of the three pieces hung on the wall at the installation. On the table in the foreground are fragments from the Nanjing poems, artwork by Tanigawa, and other objects such as photos of the massacre. Visitors were invited to spend as much or as little time as they liked, matching poem fragments to the visual material. I began my talk with two questions from Susan Sontag's troubled reflections on the evaluation of ethical meaning, on the evacuation of ethical meaning from atrocity photos in an era of media hypersaturation and the perennial seductiveness of war. In the two poems I have discussed, ethical and pacifist thoughts begin to emerge in the contemplative space created by the poem. The mournful speaker of a young woman and the flustered speaker of the beheader are led to confront unforeseen or undesired thoughts as a result of looking relentlessly at the atrocity underway. The soldier's thoughts are based on the oral history of Uno Shintaro, recorded in Honda Katsuichi's The Nanjing Massacre and elsewhere. Honda's groundbreaking interviews with Chinese victims of the Japanese invasion was published in Asahi Shimbun in 1971, reaching 4 million readers in Japan and